Welcome to all of our guests who are joining us, and welcome Josh and David, both members of the Friends School class of 2014. I appreciate everyone who's joining us this evening. Tonight we're going to hear a little about Twin Valley Distillery, where Josh and David both work, and how their operations pivoted to produce hand sanitizer during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then they'll discuss a couple of bourbons and rums. And then we get to enjoy a cocktail making demo for two of their specialty cocktails. But before we begin, I'd like to take a pause in the spirit of Quaker tradition that most of you recall, and share in a moment of quiet in order to acknowledge the current circumstances that are going on in our country. Thank you. And now for some virtual protocols for tonight. If you have questions for Josh and David throughout the evening, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to ask questions throughout the conversation, and Josh and David will answer as many as they can at the end. And of course, a virtual event disclaimer, because we are live. David and Josh and I have done everything that we can to prepare and make this event a success, but we're at the mercy of technology, as many of us are in this world right now. If our Wi-Fi misbehaves, please be patient and we'll work to get back on. In the event that we get cut off completely and are unable to resume the event, I'll send an email to everyone, but fingers crossed we don't anticipate that happening. So let's begin. First, Josh and David, can you introduce yourselves? Tell us history about the distillery, who owns it, where it is, how it came to be. And I know that it says it's the first urban distillery.
So I'm David Mandelberg. Like Christina said, I graduated in 2014. I kind of do a little bit of everything here. I work as a sales representative. I worked the bar before COVID closed it. I work a lot now in production. So I'm hoping to move to wholesale kind of as things reopen and liquor stores open up more.
So I'm Josh, like everyone else said, I'm class of 2014. Here I started kind of as just kind of retail salesperson, going to farmers markets and doing that. I worked my way up in the last 2 years, and now I actually run our bar here and do some other administrative things like running our website and stuff like that. But the company itself was founded in 2013. We are located in Rockville, Maryland, in Montgomery County, about an hour away from Friends, a little south. Owned by a Costa Rican man. His name is Edgardo Zuniga. He kind of had this dream of being an Italian chef. He opened his own restaurant. Things didn't really work out. So he was actually at home with his wife one night. His wife is Jamaican, straight from the islands. She was known for making sorrel rum, which is a drink native to the islands itself with hibiscus and ginger, really, really good. We'll see a little bit about it tonight. But he, being an Italian chef, made limoncello. His wife tried it one night and said, "This is so good. Like we should start a distillery." So he did. Turns out Maryland is one of the highest consuming states of bourbon, and we have a great history with whiskey here in the state. So we actually quickly pivoted. Before we were even a distillery, we pivoted to bourbon. First couple recipes didn't turn out fantastic, but we actually had a lot of legislation laws to change here in Montgomery County. This is actually the only county, one of two counties in the entire country that does not follow its overall state legislature when it comes to alcohol. So we had a lot of laws to change. We weren't allowed to be a distillery. We weren't allowed to sell alcohol out of our own store. Took 6, 7 months, 8 months, but then we actually got all of our licensing, all of the permits, and we kind of blazed the way for a lot of future breweries, wineries, and even a couple of distilleries have started to pop up here. So we're very proud of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Um, so talk to us a little bit about how the idea came about to produce the hand sanitizer and when you switched production.
So most hand sanitizer is only about 60% alcohol before COVID. And that's what kind of why it's so gel-like. And we were kind of thinking to ourselves, like, well, we make alcohol. Nobody has hand sanitizer right now. Like, we could make this. And we actually started laughing about it. But Edgar, the owner, kind of took it a little bit more seriously, and he thought it was a good idea. It took us about 3 days to kind of figure out a recipe, but what turned out as a joke turned into us filling the need of thousands and thousands of people in this community.
Yeah, and as COVID started and everyone realized they needed hand sanitizer, we were selling out within an hour. We would produce a couple hundred bottles, and then people would be lining up at 8 a.m. to come in and buy some. And so we had to start putting limits on it and start saying, all right, listen, we can only do like two per person, to try to make sure that we got to everyone that we could have. And, you know, we found that there was still a large need, and we still had these long lines, and people started to bring their kids to try to get more. And, you know, we even ran out of alcohol. So we had to start using our drinking alcohol to you know, put in the hand sanitizer. So it started smelling a little bit like whiskey, which I like to think is a perk, you know, but we were able to slowly reach out and get to everyone.
I always liked the limoncello batch. It always smelled the best.
Yeah, it smelled a lot like lemons.
But we definitely found that we heard hundreds and hundreds of different stories about everybody telling us why they were, you know, in need of it. I heard stories about, you know, stage 5 cancer. There was leukemia. There was just tons and tons of stories. And every kind of time I was able to help those people in need, it was very fulfilling. It was definitely worthwhile. But that being said, it was also arguably one of the most stressful times in my entire career here at Twin Valley. The amount of people, the amount of calls, like it was definitely something we had to get used to. And that transition period hit hard. But after a week or two, we kind of hit our stride and figured out what we were doing. And we were able to be more efficient and effective in how we produced and how we sold our hand sanitizers.
And you also, you didn't just sell in your storefront and farmers market, correct? Can you talk about the DC area hospitals?
Yeah, so right after we began, you know, we were thinking, like, how else can we help reach people? And I actually remember that we got a phone call from DC hospitals asking, hey, we heard that you made hand sanitizer. We were in need of some. Can you help us, you know, fill our goal? And, you know, that allowed us to really reach more people, and I think helped people who were truly in need of this, immunocompromised people and people still reeling in, as Josh said, from cancer and other forms of disease. So that was our first major, I consider it a win, and ability to really impact the local area.
The other thing that kind of we did, we were one of the first in the entire country to actually kind of make this switch. So honestly, it hadn't even been heard of by the time we had done this. And then we started getting more and more, you know, coverage. We were interviewed by German news stations, BBC, even Costa Rican news. We were on Telemundo, which was kind of cool. But after getting all of this publicity about what we were doing, we kind of turned into consultants. We had a lot of distilleries, especially smaller distilleries, that were kind of similar to us, can't produce a ton, but they were asking, like, how can we do this? We want to do our part. We want to, you know, help in any way we can. So we started kind of telling people, okay, you know, like you get this alcohol, these ingredients is the simplest way to do it. And we really tried to make it so we knew that we weren't going to be able to give hand sanitizer to everybody, but we knew everybody needed it. So it was kind of those situations where we would be sending people to our competitors and stuff like that, stuff we wouldn't normally do. However, when it comes down to it, it's about the overall community, not necessarily about a bottom line at this point. So
when the three of us first spoke about what you all were doing, we were pretty much in the middle of the height of the pandemic, and things obviously look different now. We're not out of it by any means, but we are in a little bit of a more controlled place, I would say. So can you talk about what your operations look like now that there is actually access to hand sanitizer again in some or most grocery stores? And are you still producing and selling it?
So we are still selling it. We right now have them in these 4-ounce little bottles right here. Kind of hard to see from the glare, but basically what it says is just hand sanitizer, alcohol, 80%, 4 ounces, and just Twin Valley Distillers. We also sell them in gallons. However, we're no longer producing it because the time it takes to switch from bourbon and rum to ethanol and hand sanitizer, alcohol, it just took several days, and it was kind of hard for us to maintain production of that. So we switched back to bourbon, and we're still several months behind our production quotas, but we're slowly catching up, and while we're able to still help people.
To kind of put it into perspective, our bourbons run about 90 proof or 45% alcohol. The lowest by law we're allowed to make hand sanitizer due to COVID is 65%. Our hand sanitizer is actually 80% alcohol. So we're almost doubling what we used to do, and we couldn't keep up with just the amount of alcohol it could take, because we would be able to double pretty much the amount of bourbon we would make, but we were just using all of it for hand sanitizer because that's what we needed to do. But now that we kind of switched back to production of whiskeys, we're able to, we're never going to catch up because of the nature of bourbon. You make bourbon and then it sits in a barrel for 1, 2, 10 years, however long you kind of want it to sit. So we're not really going to catch up. We're going to feel this probably in a year or two. We're going to see this just no bourbon period of 3 months. But that being said, we're also taking that into consideration and trying to find other ways to do things, such as selling rums or some of our vodkas and stuff like that, maybe using a little bit more in flavors rather than straight liquor. So there are ways that we're counteracting the fact that we haven't produced any drinking alcohol in the last 3 months.
And I think I had this question for you when we originally spoke. Can you talk about the texture? Because I was wondering at the time if you had the jelly kind or if it was different. And so can you talk a little bit about that?
So that jelliness, a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's a lower proof of alcohol. Not that you can't get 80% alcohol and still have it be very, very gel-like, but just the high proof, it's going to make it a lot more runny, less viscous, all of that good stuff. But one of the things that's kind of a benefit to our product rather than kind of that gel type is you can actually use it to spray surfaces. It has a little bit of tea tree oil, so it might have a little bit of an oily residue, but it can be put in like any kind of spray bottle and stuff like that. So it is useful, and there's advantages. Of course, there's also disadvantages with it being very, very liquidy. It runs out of your hand a little bit more, but yeah.
Yeah, as well. Part of the reason why these things are so viscous is because there's aloe vera in them, and to help smooth your skin so it doesn't get burnt by the alcohol. Unfortunately, when COVID came around, aloe vera skyrocketed in price, especially in bulk. So we couldn't get our hands on it. So we, as Josh said, put in tea tree oil, and we also put in glycol and glycerin to help kind of ease down the hands, so it comes out a lot more liquid, like water.
But it is 100% effective. I use it almost every day. It's very, very useful. And if you like the smell of whiskey, you are in for a surprise.
And you went through a few different iterations of the bottles, correct? Too?
Yes. Oh, yeah. So it definitely started with 4-ounce bottles. We had plastic 4-ounce bottles with kind of like the thumb pop tap that you can just pour out. But within 2 weeks, every single bottle of that type in the entire state of Maryland was bought. A lot of which had to do with Sagamore buying like 250,000 of them. But they sold all of those to Hopkins. I in no way, they did their part, and I'm very proud of them for that. But it made it very, very hard to find raw materials because every single distillery in the country started doing this. So bottles became an issue. We actually wound up going to Baltimore a couple times because we found just a single broker who happened to have some bottles. But then we started selling in gallons, which definitely helped a lot.
Yeah. We went from, as Josh said, 4-ounce with the thumb pop tap top And then we had to move to 8 ounce with plastic, and then we had to find another 8 ounce bottle. So it was really kind of a fluctuating kind of deal where we had to find a good middle ground. But now we're back at 4 ounce with the glass bottles.
Yeah. Until probably we wind up selling out.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you all for sharing that part of your journey. And we thank you for doing your part to help combat the pandemic. So now let's talk spirits. Josh and David, I'm going to minimize and let you take it away. We're excited to get a quick lesson about the difference between bourbon and rum and get a peek of a few of Twin Valley's signature bourbons and rums.
Absolutely. So main difference between a whiskey and a rum is what you're actually going to be making it out of. A rum is any alcohol or spirit that's been distilled by a sugarcane byproduct. So that can be sugarcane itself, sugar, or even molasses. All of those are going to give it a slightly different flavor. And basically based off of where your sugar is going to be coming from is going to be highly dependent on how your rum is going to taste. That's why people tell you if you go to the Puerto Rico, Cuban, all of those island rums, they're going to be way better just because they're using the freshest sugarcane available, all of that kind of stuff. In terms of how you age a rum, there's a couple of different ways. You can do a white rum, which is light aging to no aging. That's going to be, your light colors, let's say your Bacardi clears. Those are going to be really good for mixed drinks, especially if you use flavors like a banana or pineapple or, tropical flavors with that rum. Then we have kind of a dark rum, which is going to be in a charred barrel. There's not exactly a exact kind of barrel that is specified for this, so it definitely can vary. Some will use bourbon barrels, some will use, just other types of wood. A bourbon barrel is primarily oak, American white oak. So the other type of rum, so that was dark rum. Gold rum is going to be any rum that's actually specifically in an oak barrel. So the type of rum we're going to make is actually a gold rum because we do a bourbon barrel aged rum. It's going to get that amber color, not super, super dark, but still going to get that color from the barrel. And then, of course, we have flavored rums, which is one of our specialties here at Twin Valley, which is going to just be a rum that's either infused or mixed with other flavors. So the ones you'll see today, one of my favorites is going to be the fruit punch rum. Excited to see that one. But then we have whiskey. So that was rum. Whiskey is any alcohol distilled from a grain. Different types of grain that are most commonly used in whiskeys include barley, wheat, rye, and corn. The mash build is going to be kind of the different types of grain you use. Some do 100% corn, some do a little bit more barley, rye. It's about that blend, and each type of grain will give you a slightly different flavor when you're mixing them. So there's a couple of different types of whiskeys, just kind of as a base. There's malt whiskey and grain whiskey. When you have malted grain, all it means is they're going to germinate that grain before distilling and fermenting it. It's going to give it a little bit of a sweeter flavor in your base. And then your regular grain whiskey is ground corn, mashed, and then cooked, all that good stuff. And all whiskeys are pretty much aged in some sort of barrel. All whiskey is actually completely clear before it goes in a barrel. All of the color from any alcohol only pretty much comes from that barrel. A couple of vocab words, single cask. Single cask just means that it's going to be coming from its very own barrel. Cask is just another word for barrel, meaning one barrel. Really, really easy. Our single cask is going to be one of our featured bourbons today, and it's definitely going to be featured in our demo for our cocktail class later. So whiskeys really depend on where they come from, just like rums. However, whiskeys tend to be a little bit more specific. So there's Scotch, which is specifically from Scotland, Irish whiskey, which is Ireland, and then bourbon. Bourbon is what we are known for, and bourbon is American whiskey specifically. There is a kind of misconception that bourbon can only come from Kentucky. However, actually in 1964, the law got changed to include the entirety of America. And now there's just kind of a set of bourbon laws that make something specifically a bourbon versus not a bourbon. Bourbons typically tend to be considered the sweet whiskey because it has caramel and vanilla tones, a little bit of oaky and smoky in there. Rather as Scotch tends to be a little bit more dependent upon what location of Scotland it's coming from. So the Isleys will be a little bit more peaty, and then you have kind of the Highlands being a little bit more mild. So bourbon actually named after Bourbon Street. And the main reason for that is simply because they wanted the French to stop drinking cognac. So in attempt to kind of switch the market a little bit, they named it bourbon due to Bourbon Street down in Louisiana. The other big difference between kind of like a Scotch versus a bourbon is how it's aged. America is very vast and our temperatures vary depending on where you are. So the other thing is temperatures here are very, I don't want to say bipolar, but very up and down, very volatile. So you're going to see temperature controlled rooms versus non-temperature controlled rooms. Benefit to that is, let's say if you're in Kentucky, really hot summers, very cold winters, you're going to have the alcohol inside that barrel expanding and contrasting through that barrel itself. And you're going to be pulling out a lot more flavor and a lot more color, everything from that barrel. Versus, let's say in Scotland, where it's a little bit more even in temperature, a little bit more moist, a little bit colder. So your kind of peak aging times for bourbons tend to be a little bit lower because you have more movement in that, which is going to be kind of your 8 to 12 years is kind of your top for bourbon. But for Scotch, you kind of see, 10 to 15 in that range. Yeah. So let's talk about some of our bourbons.
Yeah.
Rums. You want to go first?
Actually,
let's go with this first. So this is going to be our single cask rum. Mind the glare. Bourbon. Single cask bourbon. Thank you. Single cask bourbon. This is going to be one of my absolute favorites. It's really good if you're a sipper. It's really good if you like mixed drinks. And actually, this is going to be one of the featured in my smoked old fashioned, one of our signature drinks here. Really good. It's going to have that caramel vanilla tones, oaky, smoky, a little bit of peppery in there. Just kind of an overall good bourbon.
Yeah. So this is our next drink. This is our blended bourbon. It's the 1812. So before I continue, I should probably talk about how we make these kind of. So bourbon, as Josh says, comes from American white oak. So what we do is we take the bourbon out of the barrel after, generally ours is aged a year and a half, but for straights, you have 2 years up to 18 years generally. So after you take it from the barrel, we want to filter it for impurities, be it just pieces of wood, charred wood, just anything from the barrel that could get into the drink. We want to filter it. We run it through a filter machine, back into some buckets, and that's when the real fun begins for me, at least. What we do is we then measure the temperature of it, and we use something called a hydrometer, which I have one right here. And what it is just a glass measuring stick that it floats in the bourbon, and it will rest on a certain number, and that will tell you the proof of the, it's kind of hard to see, but there are numbers all over it. It will rest on the proof of the alcohol, and from there, you're able to tell how much water you need to add before you come to your target proof being twice the amount of the alcohol percentage. So for our bourbons, we try to go for 45% or 90 proof. So, it will come out of the barrel at like 120 proof. So we add water to cut it down to make it so that you don't burn your tongue off when you try drinking it. Same deal for rums and for vodkas. That's how we do for the straight liquors. So you want to just hand me back to 1812 again. So when we talk about the blend, we take the single cask bourbon and we mix it with our wheat bourbon, which we don't have with us right now. Just a different kind of bourbon that we use with wheat. We mix them together, and that's what gives us its unique taste. It's more mellow. It's going to be more earthy, easier, at least for me, to drink on. I don't really like the smoke. So this is what I kind of use to wake myself up when I go to a farmer's market. So this is something that's perfect for like mixed drinks. It doesn't overpower anything. You can also use it in cocktails. We use it in Kentucky Mule.
Whiskey sour.
Oh, yeah. Those are kind of what we use this for, or you can even sip on it.
Yeah, so kind of just like mixed drinks that you want that bourbon flavor, but you don't need it to be a specific single cask, or you're just kind of looking for that whiskey with a little bit of extra oomph. So this is one of my absolute favorite things we make. It's going to look very, very similar to the first bottle I showed you, except for this word right here at the bottom. This is our rum. This is a bourbon barrel-aged rum. So it's going to be not your traditional Bacardi. It's going to have a little bit more smokiness to it because, like I said, we are a Caribbean-themed company, Caribbean style. So we're actually using sugar and molasses in this one. And so it's going to be sweet up front from that sugar and molasses, almost like a wall of smoke in the middle, and then hints of vanilla on the back end. If you just sip it by itself, you absolutely could compare it to almost like an Irish whiskey. Really, really good. This is going to be the feature in the mojito I make later. And though it's so smoky, it honestly makes one of the best mojitos I have ever had. So, yeah.
And so for our final ones, we have here 2 of our flavored rums. I want to show these both off. These are our favorites here. So this one right here, the orange one, is our fruit punch. It's our rum, and we infuse 5 different fruit juices with it: strawberry, lemon, pineapple, mango, and guava juice. It's pretty sweet, which I like. It's perfect for sipping on, for drinking. It's only 30 proof. So it's generally something that you can just drink on ice, or I like to add it with lemonade to kind of bring out that more tropical sense in it. And it will really brighten up your day and make you feel like you're on a cruise.
Or beach.
Or beach.
Yeah,
That's
or
what,
beach.
either or.
Yeah.
And this is our hibiscus sorrel. Like Josh said, this is the owner's wife's recipe for it. Hibiscus sorrel is a drink that they drink in the islands. It's generally drank around Christmas time. Its main base is hibiscus. However, after that, the flavors change to what people add to it according to where you live. Since the owner's wife is from Jamaica, we kind of go with her style of it. So we add ginger to it and a little bit of sugar. The end result is that it's a little bit more viscous than any of our other products. We use it as a floater here, but if you add it with some ginger beer, you'll have a nice dark and stormy. It's also kind of unique in its flavor because it comes off very floral, and you can kind of taste that hibiscus. It also goes well with hibiscus tea.
Absolutely. Definitely one of the most unique things that you will ever find that a distillery makes, especially in Maryland. You can travel hundreds and hundreds of miles and probably find nobody's ever made this before. So we're definitely very, very proud of this, and it's something that we will always continue to make as kind of just a starting point. This is where we started. All right. So
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, guys. So now we are going to enter the third and final, well, the second to last phase. So we're going to do some cocktail making. So Josh, you're going to work your magic.
All right.
We're going to do 2 cocktails this evening.
We are going to be making 2 of our most popular drinks. One of them is going to be the mojito. I love mojitos. I've never been to the islands, but I swear if I have, I would have drank nothing but mojitos. So everything I like to do, I like to use fresh ingredients because fresh always is going to bring out the best flavors. And on top of that, it's just going to have more flavor. I find the longer that something sits, it just gets weaker. So use as fresh as I possibly can all the time. And I don't know, I put in the effort because I really want the effort to show in my drinks. So I love putting in that little bit of extra. So fresh mint, I always clap it. The reason you clap it is just to release some of those oils and those aromatics. Plus it makes your hand smell like mint, so that's always good too. Then we're using 2 wedges of fresh lime, cut it just a little bit ago. Then we have our bourbon barrel aged rum. This, we're going to take about 2 ounces of rum. This is 90 proof. So if you had to adjust, you can always add a little bit less, a little bit more, depending on what kind of stuff you like. And then this, some people will use fresh sugar cane. I'm going to use simple syrup. I find it helps blend the flavors a little bit easier, and you don't necessarily have that coarse sugar in the bottom of your glass. So like any good mojito, we got to muddle it fresh. Some people go with just the kind of churn the butter up and down mentality. It'll work, it'll get the job done. However, I always kind of go with more of a grind method. So I'm going to take my muddle, I'm going to kind of push it down to the side, and I'm going to roll it around the edge of that glass and try to break up all of those lemon rinds, lemon zest, get all that mint. So some people also will muddle all of their kind of fresh ingredients first and then add your alcohol on top. I find that alcohol being such a great extractor, it actually pulls out some of that flavor of all of those natural oils in the rinds and that stuff too. So I actually love adding the alcohol in the very beginning and letting those flavors just marry and develop as it goes. So after we get a nice little muddle, and you'll know when it's done when you see kind of the lemon zest floating, you see mints broken up, nothing's really sticking together. Definitely more of a natural mojito look. Gonna cover it with some ice. And then this is everyone's favorite part. Get a little dance. So I shake almost every single drink I make, and the main reason for that is I find that it aerates the alcohol a little bit, allows the flavors to kind of open up and develop. Always serve over ice. Hydrate while you dehydrate. You know how it goes. So then we're going to double strain. Some people don't. Just because I know how people are when they see floating green things in their drink, I always double strain when I'm here at the bar. So nice clean flavor. And then of course, we always got to garnish, which we garnish with a little bit of a lime there. So this is our fresh mojito. Cheers.
Can you give us a close-up? Can you give us a close-up real quick, Josh, please? Beautiful.
So very, very fresh. You get all of that fresh lime, that fresh mint. Very, very good. Sweet, refreshing. But back to work. So next, we're going to be doing arguably my favorite drink here, which is going to...
Sorry, can I interrupt real quick? Because I know what's coming on that cool wood block. We need the camera tilted down just a little bit to capture.
Yeah, we can do that. All right. So this is always everyone's, one of their favorites. Yeah, it's fine.
Perfect.
So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a smoked old fashioned. So we have these chips right here. These are just French oak chips. I could go on some, grand, explanation saying I hand selected these. I tried hundreds of different kinds of woods, but the reality is we actually just use this for our rum, and it actually works as a perfect pairing with our bourbon as well. So it's kind of a lucky accident, but definitely turned out very well. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be burning these French oak chips, and I'm going to create a mini fire right here. Don't worry, I'm a professional. Done this a couple times, so I know somewhat what I'm doing here. And what I'm looking for is kind of just like an even burn throughout it going in. The reason for doing this is old fashions are one of those drinks where you can do as much or as little as you want to it. It's such a simple recipe that everything you do really, really makes a difference. So we got a little flame here. All I'm gonna do is take this glass, toss it right over top. The main reason for that is I'm gonna have this smoke bind to the inside of this glass. Every single sip you get from that will be a little bit of smoke along with that sweetness from the bourbon and the simple syrup and bitters that we're gonna get. So next, we're gonna take this. So we're gonna fill our glass, take our single cask bourbon. Now, as a rule of thumb, I always usually go about 2 ounces of liquor for my drinks. Again, 90 proof, so you're looking about a drink, a little over a drink, maybe a drink and a half. 2 ounces of bourbon. Then we got an ounce of simple syrup. And then we have this. These are bitters. all bitters are, for people who aren't 100% sure, is high-proofed alcohol. This is about 44% alcohol. And we're just going to soak flavors in it, such as a cinnamon, clove, and depending on what you soak in it, you're going to get very different flavors. So a couple of the different ones I have. This is that cinnamon clove that I was mentioning. We have orange bitters. We have fennel bitters. Just going to give you that kind of licorice flavor. But for this, I always love this. It really helps balance out the flavors of the bourbon as well. So a little 2 dashes of bitters. And you can find these at almost every single grocery store. It's very, very easy. Look in that kind of mixer cocktail section. Toss this on. All right. So here's the big release. We got what we're going to do. Take this. Now from here, most people could be done, but I like to go and be a little bit extra if I can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an orange peel here. And I'm going to take all of those oils that are on the inside of the zest. I'm going to squeeze them basically over top this drink and rim this drink with all of those extra oils. This is always people's favorite part because it's me playing with fire. And then we rim the glass. So there is no actual orange flavor in this other than what I just did, but the orange is going to come out beyond belief. And of course, like I say, I like to always be a little bit extra on top. So these, we have homemade soaked bourbon cherries, which I have been soaking for about 2.5 months now. Toss one of those on top. And we got our smoked old fashioned.
And
Tell me how I did, David.
I mean, I know how he did it because, you know, there's only one way these turns out. So yeah, what you get here, nice balance of the citrus and the bourbon brings out each other very well. You get that nice orange flavor, get that nice vanilla overtone from the bourbon. And as well, you get a little extra sweetness from the simple syrup, making it so that you can down it in one gulp if you want to, like I do.
Well, cheers.
Cheers. Here, I have mine too. Cheers. 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 And cheers to everyone in the audience as well. So before we go, thank you both so much. That was awesome. We're going to take a couple questions that have come in throughout the presentation. And I think that actually a couple of them were already answered as you went along. I think, Josh, you touched on this, but you talked about the percentage of alcohol in the hand sanitizer. That was one question from earlier.
Mm-hmm. So the alcohol percentage of the hand sanitizer that we make personally is 80%. Due to COVID restrictions, they actually kind of upped it. Like I said, most of the time it's around 60% alcohol, but they actually upped it to a minimum of 65 during the lockdown and quarantine to kind of just make sure anything that you were trying to disinfect is definitely killed.
And one question is about where folks can purchase your product and if you mail order out of state. So if you want to talk a little bit about the different options.
So yeah, there are a couple ways to get our product. First is to come by our distillery in Rockville. We carry all our products here. Another way is we do farmers markets. We do 20 farmers markets. Off the top of my head, I could list like 4 maybe. But you know, we have a full list of them. You can give us a call, and you know, we'd be more than happy to tell you where those are. As well, if you go on our website, it will give you a list of liquor stores that carry our products. Generally, they tend just to be the straight stuff, just because it keeps longer. So if you're looking more for the fruity stuff, again, I would call us. But those are generally the best ways to get our product.
In terms of mailing,
Right.
so we are actually not legally allowed. Our licensing is only for the state of Maryland right now. Due to Hogan's new temporary laws, we actually are allowed to ship anywhere in the entire state of Maryland, just bottles of alcohol. However, when it comes to out of state, we can't do anything. However, depending on where you're located, we might actually have some farmers markets that were, located in possibly near you, just out of state.
And don't you have a mile radius of delivery also?
Yes. So we will, our store ourselves, we will deliver within 50 miles, depending, and there's a delivery charge with that depending on the distance. I think it's 6, 9, and 12.
Yeah.
Like I said, depending on distance, but we are absolutely doing that. We are delivering only our drinking alcohol rather than our hand sanitizer and to-go cocktails as well, simply just to keep things simple and, try to keep our lives easier.
Yeah.
So
we're more than happy to deliver to ourselves as well.
So those out of state might need to wait until the day that you could perhaps ship out, but you can deliver locally for a fee.
We're trying.
You can deliver local for a fee, and you can be found in different liquor stores. And I'll include, when I send my follow-up email to the attendees, I'll include a link to your website so that folks can poke around. And so this is a funny one. Is hand sanitizer a cheaper way for alcoholics to get their high? That is so not from one of your buddies. It's actually from MUP.
I'd love to be able to say yes, but the fact of the matter is the way we were able to get our percentages of alcohol that high is by including all of the bad stuff, that like the methanol and the ethanol, that stuff that's going to really hurt you, or as the old wives still say, make you go blind. That stuff is all in there, and that's honestly why you can't go to the store and buy isopropyl alcohol and just start drinking it, because all of those, most of the time, the way we get rid of those is we make our cuts. So those toxic alcohol, byproducts are only burned off at higher temperatures than the alcohol that we're looking for. So we might get ethyl alcohol coming out, like 190 proof, or like almost 95% alcohol. But we're never going to drink that because it's dangerous. It's very, very bitter. Not like a little sip will kill you, but it definitely won't make you better.
Smile.
It won't make you better.
And then we'll do 1 or 2 more questions. Which are the favorites of your bottles, and how has the reception been of the more unique blends?
So my favorite stuff, for whiskeys, I prefer probably the 1812. Like I said, I can't do the single cask as well. I drink the 1812. It's probably my favorite just because it gives you that nice flavor without any of the smokiness. For the rums, I really like the fruit punch. Even before we add in the rum, you can usually find me siphoning off some of the punch itself just so I can drink it. As well, it's just something that, it was one of my first drinks I had here. It's one of the first things I really tried to do a mixed drink with. So I came to really love that one. For the unique blends, actually, it depends on what it is. Like we do a peanut butter whiskey, which is extremely unique. It's called a screwball whiskey, I think, in some other places.
That's the mainstream term. It's screwball whiskey.
Yeah, my mom loves it. I bought her a bottle of it. I like it. It's a good dessert liquor. But it really depends on the actual customer or consumer's taste.
So for me, and I'm actually really glad you didn't say either of my two. So my two are both whiskeys. I absolutely love, we do a rye whiskey. Maryland has such a huge history when it comes to rye whiskey, especially in Pikesville of all places. They're known for that Pikesville rye. But our rye whiskey is one of, I think, the most unique things we make. It's a bourbon barrel-aged rye whiskey. So what you're going to get is kind of that rye whiskey flavor up front. But then it's going to be a bourbon in the back. Rye whiskey is kind of known for a back bite. So you're going to get all of that kind of intense alcohol flavor at the back. Bourbon's actually the opposite. That's why a lot of people like bourbon, because you get that bite out of the way and then it's just all flavor. So by having rye in the front and bourbon in the back, it's so smooth because at all of those points, you just have flavor. Perfect for Manhattans. Most people don't actually know this. Manhattans almost always were traditionally used with rye whiskey. Today, almost every single one of them is going to use bourbon, which is why it's here at the bar. I always use our rye because it's that perfect balance of that new and old. And you asked about unique. So we get asked all the time. The two big whiskeys out there are usually bourbon and scotch. We get asked all the time if we make scotch. And I have to tell people, no, I'm not in Scotland. You know, I can't be making scotch. However, most scotch is made from barley. And we have actually done a bourbon barrel-aged barley whiskey. And it turned out to be one of the most popular items to buy by the ounce here at the bar. So it's almost going to be like a Highland Scotch, very mild in flavor, no peatiness, but it's going to be that smoky, earthy whiskey of a Scotch. And it's one of those things where we didn't assume that it was going to be super popular, but then when it came out, people just really liked it.
Okay, so one last question. I think you touched a little bit on this in the beginning, how you both got into this business. A little bit about your journey between FS and now, and it can be a really quick overview.
You want to start?
Okay, so after graduating Friends in 2014, I went to Susquehanna University and I studied physics for 4 years. I loved it. I found that I was able to apply everything from what I learned from physics, because that's all it is. It's just application. So what I would do is basically just observe different things. Let's say if somebody really liked one aspect of a drink, but they didn't really care for something else, I would take note of that and kind of shift and do things like that. But I always worked in restaurants and you know, I was a waiter, I was bar back, a busboy. Technically, I've never been a bartender before working here, which is funny because now I run a bar. But at the same time, you know, I always liked whiskey, and I definitely found after college that I grew to gain an actual appreciation for whiskey, which most people don't get by the age of 24. And I'm very honored that I have that. But like I said, I started in as a part-time salesman. I was doing 1 or 2 farmers markets a week for our owner. And then I started excelling. I like sales, you know, I started doing well. And then I started making cocktails at beer festivals. And, you know, one of my favorite events was tacos and tequila. That was fantastic. But I started making drinks, got a little bit of notoriety. And then when we opened the bar last November, it was a perfect fit for me just to kind of step in here and do what I've done for the past couple of years.
Yeah, mine is a little different than Josh's. So
Very different.
After I graduated Friends, I went to American University down in DC. While I studied marketing when I was there, but I really carried over from my time at Friends my love of baseball. So I began scouting baseball when I was in college. I worked as a professional scout for about a year before I came on last year. I also worked as a part-time salesperson. I did 2 to 3 markets a week. And then when COVID started, I moved more to doing production. And that's what kind of brought me here now. I'd help out Josh in the bar occasionally. You know, it's been a wild one.
Best bartender right here.
I defer that to him.
All right. Well, I really, really appreciate one last one that you don't have to answer, but it's funny. And because this attendee, Sam, has stayed on.
I want you to know I have the questions up. And
good. Okay. Well, it's about fantasy football, but we won't bother the other attendees with it unless there's a short answer about who's going to win.
It is not Sam. It's the short answer. It's not anybody but not Sam. Yeah, he's not going to win.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you to you both, Josh and David, for sharing with all of us tonight. I hope you enjoyed yourselves as much as I enjoyed myself, and the attendees hopefully enjoyed themselves as well. Thanks to everyone who joined us, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for visiting with us tonight.
All right. Good night, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.